Hey everybody, welcome to this week's edition of the PR Week podcast. My name is Frank Washcook. I'm the news director at PR Week, and I'm thrilled with this week's guest. It is industry legend Buck Buchwald. How are you, Buck?
I'm great.
Good. And we're going to be going through Buck's whole history, working at Burson-Marsteller, everything he's seen in his many decades in the industry, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay.
All right, so let's get started as soon as Sean Zarnecki behind the dials gives me the go-ahead for the audio. All right, so in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PR Week. That's PR Week's weekly podcast for everything going on in the worlds of PR and communications. My name is Frank Washcook. I am the news director at PR Week and MM&M magazines, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Buck Buchwald, who is an industry legend. Buck, thank you for making the time to join us today.
I wish I were a true legend. I like the title. It's okay.
The man, the myth, and the legend. And Diana Bradley is here with us as our podcast co-host. Diana, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so Buck, set the scene for me. Years and years ago, you meet a fellow named Harold Burson.
Well, I tell you, in my early days, which is a long time ago, the big names were essentially companies like Carl Bayer and Hill and Olden. And they were heavily driven by people who came from the media. Our foundation was not the general public, but business to business. For instance, when I first got into the PR business, which I didn't intend to do because I never knew it existed, but just for some background, I studied chemical engineering. I wasn't a very good engineer, but I liked to write. One of the guys I met down in Oak Ridge on the atom bomb project when I was there was with an advertising agency that had a chemical account. And we got to talking, and I told about my interest, and they gave me a list of people to talk to when I got back to New York. And one of the agencies they interviewed with, a company called Sheldon Morse, Hutchinson Easton, they were a strictly PR on business subjects kind of a company. I couldn't type. I had never written a news release in my life. I didn't even know what PR stood for. I went up for the interview anyhow. And what impressed them, of course, wow, a chemical engineer? Terrific. We have a big chemical company. They'll love you. And of course they did. Why? Because I spoke the language and I could relate to the business they were in. And so in my career, I was in 2 companies. Sheldon Morse, Hutchinson Easton. I was there for 5 years. I learned all they had to teach me. And then I got bored. I used to finish my work in the morning. Lunchtime, I used to go to a movie across the street just to kill time. Nothing to do. I met Harold's wife. Her name was Betty Burson. And she was a member of a group called the Industrial Publicity Club, as contrasted to PRSA or the Publicity Club. And these are all people who were involved in selling products and services to other companies rather than to the general public. I became the editor of the newsletter, and we got to know each other. One evening she said to me, Buck, you know, Hal's a one-man shop. He needs people. You know anybody? I said, yeah, me. And so I joined Harold in, I guess it was 1952. And you know, that was the beginning. We started off, him and me and his wife as a secretary. And ultimately we merged with an advertising agency. And the significance of that was we were a small company. We were both very good, but you know, to get a big account, you have to be big. You can't get big until you get the big account. So what comes first? So we were caught in this tight circle. We did pitch after pitch to trade associates, corporations. They said, gee, you know, you young fellas are very smart, but you got an office that's the size of a bathroom. But we can't. We merged with a company called Marsteller, who was an industrial advertising agency. And the day we merged, we quadrupled our business because we got 2 of their major accounts. And from there on in, it was tremendous growth for Burson-Marsteller, to the point where, I guess around 1965 or so, we became the largest public relations firm in the world. We had offices on practically every continent, and we had companies like IBM and U.S. Steel and all the big, hoo-ha names of industry in those days. Of course, more than today. Anyhow, so that was the context in which I had my career. One of the interesting things was, IBM was a tremendous name now. Everybody was scared of IBM. Why? We're all going to be IBM cards, and they'll staple us, and we're going to be characterized as a number in a big machine. Who's IBM today? But rather than us being homogenized, you couldn't possibly have a more diffuse, a more personalized, or more single-oriented kind of a communications environment than you have today. In my early days, the big thing was mass communications. Live, Time, Newsweek, the Today Show, the Tonight Show, the Morning Show, people en masse. But the fact of the matter is, for our clients, they were much more interested in being able to talk to that segment of that mass that they could relate to. By you guys, you could do that today in spades. So if there's any major revolution, it's the fact that rather than technology making us, just a homogeneous nothing, it's fractionating the public to the point where, for any professional communicator, it's pretty darn difficult. Who do you talk to? How do you control your message? It's then if you got it on the front page of the Times, you got it on the front page of the Times. There you get on the front page, that's a big deal. You want to know where did it go viral in the social network? So that's been the major change that I've seen. The fundamentals of how you persuade and how you get people to act, those haven't changed. But the mechanics, the technology to do that has radically changed.
So you mentioned with an early client you spoke their language because you knew chemicals and you knew what they were talking about, and you guys could speak the same language, like you said. I mean, we still hear that from a lot of agencies. It's important for the people working on the accounts to know the business of the clients inside and out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that we used to pride ourselves on was, if a reporter talked to somebody from Carl Bayer, the Carl Bayer guy had to say, well, let me check with my client, because he didn't know what the hell guy was talking about. But we could. I mean, if they asked a question, we could answer authoritatively because we understood the product and the marketing objectives of the client. We always stressed the importance of immersing oneself in the business of your business so that you could communicate effectively. And as a matter of fact, today we talk about high tech, and you can't be hired unless you really au courant with what the hell's going on. Well, we were unique in that we hired physicists and chemists, lawyers and doctors, all these guys and women who were intrigued with communications, were bored with their profession, and wanted to make a change. Well, for us, the fact that they didn't know a damn thing of communications wasn't that important. Because if you could introduce a doctor as your staff member to a pharmaceutical company, hey, you're 2 steps ahead right then and there. And so we tended to attract and to develop a staff that we called double domed. They had a professional area of expertise, and they knew the communications business, which we taught them. And it was a tremendous asset to us when we competed for business and when we performed, because when we went into a client and we could assign an account executive who understood their business, didn't have to be talked up to or down to. It was an advantage.
And so, who were your favorite clients over your career? Who did you do the most memorable work with, and why?
Well, there are 2 of them. One was IBM. And one of the most exciting things in my career, General Motors. one of the most exciting things in my career was General Motors in those days, this was in the 60s, had a meeting of all of their communicators from all over the world. We're talking about 300 or 400 people, every division, every country. And we were asked to make a presentation. I had developed a presentation that discussed issues of the day, consumerism, pollution, women's rights. These were all emerging in those days.
And what year was this?
I'm sorry?
What year was
This was the 60s. This is
Okay.
the early days when they were suddenly coalescing around issues rather than something else. And so they asked me to make this presentation. The presentation was supposed to take about an hour and a half. They gave me 45 minutes. Boy, did I sweat. And so I'm coming to this was in Detroit, in a huge assembly room, all the GM people there, including members of the board. And they said, Buck, go talk. Well, I did a terrific job, I must say. It just happened. That was like the highlight of my career.
Uh-huh.
Without notes, with just slides behind me, marching back and forth, talking to these big heavy hitters like I knew what I was talking about. They were impressed as hell.
Well, what did you talk about? What did you present on?
The changing nature or the changing relationship of the corporation as it was going through. As I said, there was a period about the time we came on when the guy was the head of a corporation. When he got up in the morning and he walked into his office, he was king. This was that's him. What he says goes. And then the government came. They told him who to hire, how much to pay, what kind of working conditions there should be, what the relationship between employees should be, and on and on and on. I mean, this was a wholly different ballgame. These guys weren't used to it. And that was one of the reasons that the function grew and developed. Because the senior management recognized you couldn't fly by the seat of your pants when the government was right on top of you punitively. And so they needed people who could help them shape messages, help them identify problems. And slowly but surely, the status of the public relations function grew in its relationship with the marketplace, both as in agencies or on staff. And that was one. The other one was the famous Tylenol case. You remember that in Chicago, somebody, never discovered who, put poison into Tylenol bottles, and people died. And the question was, what do you do? And this was a classic case where the public relations sense could tell you what to do. This was a joint relationship between us and the PR department at the company.
At J&J.
Right,
Yeah.
J&J, right. And so step one was every package of Tylenol in the United States had to come off the shelves, even though maybe 1,000th of them were, if that many. Well, that's it, no question, zippo. A. B, from that time on, this impacted packaging all kinds of products. Each bottle, before it went out, was sealed. And once the seal was broken, you knew somebody used it. And then came the communications question. How do you communicate all this? I don't mind saying, it was the ad guys, well, they'll run ads, big ads, full page ads. And our attitude was, that doesn't have enough credibility. What are you going to run a big ad saying that was not safe? And so what we did was organize a series of press conferences across the country, not one nationally, but from one major market to the other. And had the senior executives of Johnson & Johnson explain what happened, what was done, and why they feel they've solved the problem. And the media that was there could ask them any goddamn question they wanted to. Well, that was, tremendous believability. It's interesting, one of the big, I forget his name, one of the big writers of the advertising said, well, that's the death of Tylenol. You can kiss that product goodbye. Nobody's going to buy it now. And there was a remarkable rejuvenation of a name which was like a household word. Those two events, one self-fulfillment and one PR performance that always stuck in my mind from my career. There are other exciting things. I was involved in a number of nuclear problems. 3 Mile Island was a client of mine, and the utility was. Mm-hmm. And the need was, how should they respond? How should they react? And the basic thesis that I had was, upfront, very frank, answer everything. Whereas his people were telling him, don't say anything, because if you say something, you'll get into trouble. Just avoid anything. So those kinds of events always thrilled me because it lent content to the public relations function. One of the problems public relations faces is PR is a whitewash. Everybody knows that. I mean, when you have a problem, you PR it away. And, you know, what do you do? Oh, you're a PR. Oh, well. What happens if you want to tell the truth? Do you know how to do it? But of course, it's not true. A PR function is can contribute in a very critical way to the success of any organization, because the PR function deals with the frictions that develop between various publics, and how do you lubricate those meshes? That's the highest function that public relations has, and for that reason, to the economic success of an organization, it's worth its weight in gold. And unfortunately, neither the public nor public relations people themselves appreciate the importance and significance of what they do. They should in no way try and deal with the whitewash thing, because it's true. It's true for lawyers. It's true for any professional who is a consultant to a client. The professional's function is to help the client look good, be it in terms of economics as an accountant, or be it as a salesman or whatever. The fact of the matter is, people in the PR function have that responsibility too, but they have a higher capability to enable the various publics to talk to each other and to understand their points of view, even if they don't agree. But it requires the insight on the part of the public relations practitioner to understand that he or she has an ability, that they shouldn't sell themselves short, which they tend to do, and the public buys into.
Mm-hmm. So you talked a lot before about the differences in media and mass media from when you were first starting to help run the agency and now. I mean, what is your perception when you look at the PR industry at large now? I mean, what do you think when you look at the agencies of today?
Well, this is certainly an era of change. And I think both clients, the function, and agencies are still trying to figure out how they should operate. Well, we let the cat out of the bag. We opened the gates to the prison, and information is out, and it's not as easy to control as it used to be, and so we're still. I think people who are involved in communications, either professionally or otherwise, either with agencies or with companies, are still feeling the way. And how do you take advantage of the fact that if you want to talk to red-headed, blue-eyed consumers, you can, and at the same time, if you want to influence public opinion or public attitudes on issues that transcend, and now, how do you do that? We're still feeling our way that way, and it's difficult for the public because there's too much crap that goes out because there's no control, so to speak. which is not to say crap didn't go out before, but it was better controlled. That's all.
So what do you think about the merger of where you used to work, Burson-Marsteller and Cohen & Wolf, that happened early last year, almost a year ago now?
Well, having been out of the company, it's hard for me to comment.
Mm-hmm.
When I was with Burson-Marsteller, we acquired Cohen & Wolf. We felt that they were a useful regional company in an area that we thought was significant business. I was kind of surprised at the results of the merger, but I'm out of the office. I had no responsibilities. I presume they had some real strategy for going that way. What can I tell you?
And I have to mention too that you have a lot of your family has followed you into the business too. You must be pretty proud of that.
What kind of family?
Well, your family has followed you into the business.
Well, they did,
Mm-hmm.
but that's through my doing. Buchwalds are writers, be it on the married side or with the Buchwald name side.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of our grandchildren, one way or another, have gotten into the communications business. My first cousin, a guy named Godfrey, was a hugely successful critic in the theater. He was a Buchwald. Art Buchwald, who I got to know, is a distant relation of the overall Buchwald clan. So it runs in our blood, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I became a chemical engineer, but I ended up as a writer, you know, and none of my grandchildren had any interest in math or science or technology, but they did like the concept of communicating. Mm-hmm. So that's the it. So I have 7 grandchildren, and all of them are in the business one way or another. And one of my children, my daughter, was the head of our own agency at the same time. So we're in it.
Fascinating stuff, Buck, and we could go on for hours and hearing war stories and
that's
and
true.
everything
I got
else.
it.
Yeah. Buck, thanks very much. So I'm going to kick it over to Diana now, who's going to walk us through the news of the week, starting with the Super Bowl beer brand brawl that's going into its second week now, right?
Yeah, the controversy.
The controversy, yes.
Yes.
Fill us in on that.
So the latest on this is the Coors Light, or Miller Coors, the parent company, they said that Bud Light actually did them an enormous favor by saying that they use corn syrup in their beers during the Super Bowl ad.
And what's your take on that? I mean, we're all cynics at heart here. I mean, do you think they did them a big favor or not so much?
It's hard to say what the average Joe consumer thinks of this whole battle.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just kind of like an inside baseball thing where marketers are just taking note of the interesting battle. I mean, it was interesting last week. Bud Light directly called out Miller Coors head of communications Pete Marino on Twitter, and
Ye old CCO.
yeah, they called him
yes.
Ye Old CCO to go with the medieval theme.
But they
that
spelled
were
old
doing.
wrong without the E, unfortunately.
Oh, they did?
They did,
Oh,
yes.
no.
Anyway.
But yeah, so they called him out in a tweet saying that, because he had been criticizing their ad, and you know, it's like you just wonder what do just normal Twitter users think of this kind of battle. But yeah, the latest is that Miller Coors is now, or Coors Light is holding a toast to farmers this
Mhm.
Friday. So they're kind of taking this opportunity to bond with farmers who, you know, help them with their ingredients like corn, and they're just showing thanks for all of their work, and they even used some singers that were at the Grammys.
That's right. A
to
country
help
music group.
promote it. A
So
country
really
music
going all
group,
in on
so
corn is Miller Coors.
Going
this
all
week.
in on corn and farmers and yeah.
Buck,
so-
did you ever have any clients that sort of took the gloves off with another company?
I can't think of it offhand, but what I can say is that as a strategy, I think it's a bad strategy. Whenever you have to kick the competition, I think it's a reflection of your own weakness, and particularly if you're marketing a consumer product, if you can't succeed on the attractiveness and desirability of your own product. And the only way to do is by knocking the competition. I think that's a good strategy.
Okay, Diana, tell us about two major people moves that happened this week. Natalie Karras and a big hire over at Edelman.
Sure. So Natalie Karras, she was hired by IBM as VP of Technology, AI, and Watson Communications. She joined this week. She reports to Chief Communications Officer Ray Day. This follows, over the past few years, Natalie has held a number of roles for short periods of time. She handled brand marketing for Oracle after a short stint as Edelman's Global Chair of Technology that ended in September 2017. Before that, though, she was VP of Global Communications at Twitter for about 6 months, but she's best known for her 14-year tenure at Apple. So her last position there was head of worldwide corporate communications, and she helped support the launch of iPod, iTunes, iPhone, App Store, iPad, all the big Apple products that we all know very well today. She worked directly with former CEO and co-founder Steve Jobs, Tim Cook, and Jonathan Ive. So she has quite the background, and it'll be interesting to see what she does now at IBM.
Right. And tell us about Edelman's big hire from this week.
Sure. So Judy John, she was the North America Chief Creative Officer and Canada CEO at Leo Burnett, and she is now Global Chief Creative Officer at Edelman.
Really impressive hire, in my opinion.
Yeah, very
impressive
interesting hire. She'll be based in Toronto and report to Richard Edelman. And she starts April 29th. She'll be in charge of Edelman's creative network, which is comprised of 600 plus creatives and planners globally.
Now, of course, everybody says they're creative, but it's always interesting when a PR firm can sort of grab a big creative name away from an ad agency. So interesting to see, for sure. Okay, a fun story here. Tell us about what the Moe's marketing team was up to this week.
Sure. So Moe's decided to tackle a problem as we all see every day. People are constantly complaining about brands on social media.
You're kidding.
And people were complaining about Moe's Southwest Grill had removed their white chicken from their menu last year, and a lot of people were not happy about it. And anyway, this week Moe's brought it back to the menu, but they did it in an interesting way. They created a video showing their members of their PR and marketing team reading mean tweets from consumers about the fact that they had taken the white chicken off the menu. And so it was interesting, and a lot of the tweets were directed at the marketing team. Like one of them said, your head of marketing needs to go back to elementary school, that kind of thing.
People get very emotional over white chicken. They really do.
They do, and the people were reading the mean tweets, and they were upset. So they made a video showing themselves reading the mean tweets, and yeah.
I think that was smart.
Smart.
I think people enjoy when brands can make fun of themselves a little bit, and when the folks doing the marketing can make fun of themselves a little bit. So I think that was smart.
And it reminds people on Twitter that everybody is human, and when you tweet mean things, it's not nice.
Well, unless you're a bot, which is an issue nowadays.
That's true. That's a whole other conversation.
Exactly. Okay, well, that's about all we have time for this week on the PR Week. I want to thank Buck again for joining us. This was a tremendous conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And we will see you again next week when Steve Barrett will be back as our host for the next edition of the PR Week. Thanks again.